Hello, hello. Hi, friends. Hey, everybody. We have some seats over here in the front. See a lot of people in the back. Sorry. We're going to be getting started pretty soon, so to have you kind of get settled in. Thank you.
Hi. Hey everyone, can you hear me? Yes? Guess it's a little easier when the music stops and we're quiet. It's so great to have you guys here. My name is Ariel Friedlander. I'm a community champion on the Buffer team. And it's so amazing to see you all here, so thanks for coming out. If you don't know, the whole Buffer team right now, we're a distributed team, so we work all over the world remotely. And we're actually all together here in Honolulu this week for a retreat. So it's really incredible to have this chance to get to know the local tech startup scene and entrepreneurs and anyone else who came out tonight. So thank you all. We are periscoping this event, so I think we're trying to get the link out in Twitter. So feel free to check out our Twitter handle, our Twitter account, which is @Buffer. And feel free to, once that link is up, or that tweet is up, you can share it with anyone else you think might be interested. And if you want to tweet or Instagram anything tonight, feel free to use the hashtag BufferMeetup or Buffer Hawaii if you like. And I think that may be it. I'm going to hand it over to Richung to welcome our guest. So here he is.
One guy in the crowd, thank you.
Hey everybody, welcome to BoxJelly. It's great to see so many new faces and so many old friends. It's always great to have everybody over here. Sorry, everybody in the back. Can you hear us back there, way in the back? Can you hear us? Yeah? Okay, cool. So just a couple housekeeping things before we start. There's a bathroom right here. There's also a women's restroom on the other side if you kind of turn around. So you go around here, make a left, and then pretend you go like through the wall there. So you have to go all the way around. It's there. We have some people in the front. BoxJelly staff, could you kind of raise your hands so people can see who you are? Naomi's over here, back there. So you can ask them if you have any questions about that. Other stuff. Food, alcohol, water, all there. Please help yourselves. Yeah, I guess we'll get started. So, yeah, Joel, Leo, super stoked to have you out here. Do we have some lace for our guests? Yeah. Great. So I'm just kind of curious to see a little bit of who the audience is. We're going to touch on a lot of things dealing with starting, like early years and starting your company. So I'm kind of curious, how many people are starting their companies right now, or are doing entrepreneurs? You entrepreneurs? Bunch of entrepreneurs? Great. And also we had Buffer come and talk, Joel come and talk, maybe like about 7 months ago, something like that. How many people had come to the previous talk? Okay, got like a little smattering there. That's great. So we're going to go over some of the things that kind of make your company special, and yeah, get to it. So yeah, first of all, what are you doing in here in Hawaii?
Yeah, hello everyone. It's so great to be here. Thanks so much for BoxJelly for organizing. Thanks to Ariel and some of the Buffer folks for helping me out as well. So good to have this amazing turnout, people in the back. I hope you get some seats so we don't make it too long, so you don't have to stand so long. But we are here for the 7th Buffer retreat. So we are a remote company. People work from wherever they want to. We don't have a physical office location, and people can generally choose to live and work from wherever. One of the things, or one of the results because of that is that we do want to see each other face to face every so often, and it's actually really helpful, really useful for us to do that, and we love going to those amazing places. So right now we're in Hawaii. Before we've been in Iceland, we've been in lots of different places that I would call quite exotic. And I think the great thing for us is that we get to do that. At the same time, we also find it really essential to actually see each other face to face and go beyond sort of just the screen time that we have. And yeah, we are here. It's started on the Saturday, and yeah, we'll be spending a week together, some work, some play, and so far it's been incredible.
So I'm just kind of curious, during your retreats, like what kind of vibes are going on there?
By the way, Leo, maybe you want to retweet the Periscope. Yeah, that's a great one. So it's really fun. It's really a way for us to all get together, bond, get to know each other better. One of, I think, the key things we find is that before a retreat for a lot of us, and so this time there's 90 people here on retreat. It's about 70 team members and 20 significant others and kids who we also invite along to the retreat. And so actually this time half the team is on their first retreat, so it's been a crazy period of time for us. The last 6 months we've doubled. And so when you're working together remotely and you've not met each other, we have a lot of video calls, so you do get to know each other on a good level, deep level, but what we find is that it's really meeting in person and understanding each other more, like mannerisms and just the tone of your voice and like things like that, where I think we really find like afterwards when we work together again, then it feels like you read the emails or the Slack messages and you can kind of hear that person's voice and really know that person a bit better. So it's really a really powerful time for us to bond, get to know each other better, and then also really fun, just a great time to do some activities together and then also do some work. So we work and we generally try and focus on slightly higher level work things, brainstorming, doing whiteboarding things, which can be a bit easier in person, or for example, engineers and designers are working together this time to get kind of a local development environment set up so that all the designers can be jumping in and doing code as well. So things like that where you can really be hands-on and help each other with things as well. So yeah, it's just super fun. We generally work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Friday, and then we have Thursday as like an off day, which is something that's evolved a lot. We've tried different things in different retreats, and so now Thursday is an off day. We have activities, and that's where especially people with significant others or kids can take time to do things as well.
Nice. Leo, it's great to have you out here. Last time it was just Joel. Kind of curious. I mean, a lot of people have trouble finding a co-founder. I know, like, for me, it was like a long process. I know, probably a lot of you. How did y'all meet, and how did the company kind of get off the ground?
Yeah, that's a great topic. I think the co-founder dynamic, co-founder chemistry is, I think, one of the most important things. I think no different at Buffer. We both went to the same university back in the UK. I went to Warwick University, and Joel had done a master's in computer science, and I'd been studying management at the business school. And the time when we got to meet, Joel had actually already finished university, and he was sort of still close. He was helping out with events, doing some talks and helping sort of other entrepreneurs. There was this entrepreneurship society on campus that I think we both got connected, and there was actually Joel's previous co-founder, speaking of co-founders, from Joel's previous startup called One Page that actually originally introduced us. So I'm really grateful to him, and we're still on very good terms. And we kind of were hanging out there. I was in college. Joel was working on his startup / helping out other entrepreneurs and mentoring people. And it was sort of a time where I was trying to do projects myself, and Joel was obviously much further along than most people there. And we got sort of chatting about the idea of Buffer when Joel had already worked on it for some time, and he'd already built the first version, and we had sort of an early user base, and I was sort of catching up with him, like how things were going, and got really curious about where he had gotten Buff already at that stage, and I was kind of offering, or was excited to help out and kind of saying like, hey, I can try and do some marketing, kind of help out with some social media stuff, and that's really how it came out of. And I think what I love about that process, if I think back on it, like sometimes we kind of think about finding another co-founder, that's sort of top of mind, instead of trying to get someone to help with something very specific, or myself like trying to want to help with something very specific, where it's almost a byproduct, and I think it truthfully was in our case, where me ending up to be a co-founder was really a byproduct of us, first of all just wanting to work together a little bit more, and then over time seeing how it felt and how it was, and then starting to feel like, okay, I'm kind of helping with the user acquisition part, we're getting some more customers. Joel can focus a little bit more on product and making the product really amazing, especially because we launched it in a very early, raw form. And I think that combination of sort of like myself trying to do marketing, Joel on the product side, so just working in tandem on those projects together, and help each other on each other's sides as well. Joel on the marketing side, me giving some inputs on product and what I've been hearing from customers. I think it's been generally a really, really great flow that felt very organic. It felt very unforced. It felt very sort of coming from the true intention of what's the content, what's the product we're building, and not like it's almost like the co-founder is almost like a skeleton, right? It's almost like a shell of an idea, where the content is really like just working on something together that you're trying to both grow. And I think like trying to get that dynamic right is super important. And I've definitely been on the wrong side of that before. I think working with Joel, it was like trying to find a co-founder first before I even had an idea and that sort of thing.
Nice. So usually when starting a company, you're trying to solve some kind of problem. So I guess kind of two-part question. What was the product that you wanted to solve with product? And also, what was the problem you're trying to solve with the culture?
That's a great.
Awesome. That's a really good one. So the original problem that I came across for myself was I had my previous startup. I was working on that for about a year and a half, and all throughout that time I was on Twitter, and I was using Twitter as a way to network and meet other people that were interested in startups. And I was, in order to do that, I was kind of sharing a lot of articles that I came across around startups and how to be successful, things like that. And so I found that sharing these articles on Twitter was really useful. It was triggering me to be able to be in touch with more people. People would, reply to those. It would trigger a conversation, or maybe even then end up meeting someone, in person and forming those kind of, working relationships, or those connections that way. So I started trying to do that more and more. I was reading more articles, sharing more, and then I kind of hit this block of like, I would read maybe 15 or 20 articles in my morning, and I would want to share 5 or 10 of those on Twitter. And what I would end up doing is like flooding my stream with like these 5 or 10 tweets, and then having nothing else to share for the rest of the day. So I thought like, okay, what can I do about this? And I thought, okay, really what I want to do is space those tweets out throughout the day. And so I looked around, how can I do this? And I found there was TweetDeck and Hootsuite around at the time that had scheduling features for Twitter. So I could schedule those tweets and space them apart. The thing was with Hootsuite, you had to specifically choose the date and time for the tweet, and so I had a notepad. I literally would write down the last time that I'd scheduled the previous tweet, so that then the next time I would read an article I wanted to share, I would go and look in my notepad and see 12 p.m. and say, okay, I want to just share this 5 hours later. So then I would go into Hootsuite and choose like 5 p.m. for that. And so I did that for a while, and then it felt quite cumbersome. I thought, like, okay, really what I want to do is just space out these tweets. I don't care about the timing of them specifically, just care that they're spaced out. And so that was like really the initial idea like that I had. It's just like clicked in that moment. I thought, okay, maybe this is something that I want for myself. Maybe other people want this as well. And yeah, maybe Leo, if you have some thoughts on the culture.
Yeah, I think the culture problem really happened more over time. Like very early on, we had some slight intuition. We were reading this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which I think had a huge impact on both of Joel and my own life. I would still call that sort of maybe the beginnings of the culture, but certainly maybe before the culture. But the real the real thing that we want to tackle with the way we think about culture now is to create, an incredibly fulfilling workplace for everyone that's part of Buffer, and selfishly for ourselves as well. And a lot of the things that we do at Buffer somewhat selfishly stem from the kind of lifestyle or kind of ideas around life that Joel and I have about how we think, what it is about having a great life or living a fulfilled life and being a happy life, and kind of taking some of those ideas and applying them more widely across the company. So when a lot of people ask us about, why do we do culture? Why do we have these values? Why are we so transparent? Why are we, working remotely? Why do we have those retreats? Why, all those questions really, I think, if I trace them back all the way, it's really about creating a fulfilling environment both for ourselves, for everyone that works at Buffer, and oftentimes, I think the difference we want to make at Buffer is that oftentimes in companies, what's interesting is creating a culture is sort of a means to be more efficient, right? And a means to create a more engaged company to build a better product. And that's not bad. I don't think that's a bad way to do it. That's a very common way, that still creates a very fulfilling environment. And companies that do a great job at that. There's plenty of them. The difference that we wanted to make is to just make it, instead of just a means, make it an end in itself, right? To say like, that is a goal, like that in like, the product is a goal, yes, but also like the environment that we're creating and how fulfilling that is, that in itself is a goal. Like even if that doesn't necessarily bring us, some of the, better revenue or better growth, or that in itself, we want to look back on saying like, that's something we've accomplished. People, hearing how happy or excited people are because they work at Buffer, that in itself is part of our ultimate bottom line to some extent. And I think that's something that stems from something very selfish, but hopefully also creates something that makes it exciting to be part of this journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy because you have this culture, and you're able to build a culture not only just in like one place, but you have people working like all over the place, and that's like amazing itself. Like, how does that work? Like, what was it like to build a company that's like lets people out?
Yeah, I think so. We focused on quite a few things to try and have a really strong and really amazing culture. Hopefully, even though we're completely spread out. So yeah, we are literally 75 people in 50 different cities in 5 continents, and we don't have an office of any sorts. So I think the way that we've tried to tackle that is one of the early inspirations for us was Basecamp, who are also kind of a remote team, and they have this idea of like having no advantage to being in the office and no disadvantage to being out of the office. And the key thing with that is this idea of not ending up with the having a second-class citizen of someone that's not missing out on information and things. So because we're all remote, it means that for us we call Slack the office, and any conversation we're having is going on Slack. So then you can see everything that's going on and have ideas and that kind of thing. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is we have a few different things we do. One of our values is self-improvement, and we try to have those conversations. We try to bring in the idea of like bring your whole self to work, talk about things that are beyond just work, and have those conversations with each other. I think there's things that go on outside of work that really can impact you, and work can impact your life, outside of work as well. So we want to have those conversations going on. So I think some of these things that we focused on, and just being a distributed team, it means that there's a few amazing things that I've noticed that come from that around that I kind of never would have imagined. There's several people in the team with young kids, and they've mentioned to me, and it's been amazing now that we invite significant others to the retreats, because I've had a few people's wives or husbands or boyfriends, girlfriends coming up and saying to me like, you've like changed my life, which is just incredible. And like one of the things is that people now one example is that no longer having 3 hours of commuting time per day, but not only that, but also working from home. So it's kind of this double benefit, and this is someone in the team that has 2 like very young kids, and before becoming part of the team felt like he was not able to really be around to see his kids growing up. And so that's kind of one example. And then the other example is people that are maybe a bit more free and they want to travel the world, and so there's a lot of travel going on all the time. There's like different groups that form in different places, and yeah, I think having the retreat is a key thing for us to help us keep that strong culture as well.
Yeah, it's a strong culture. Part of it is it's very interesting that I know how much money you're making. I know how much money you're making. You can see how much money they're making. If they're making more money than last month, right? This is really interesting. Radical transparency. Why? How?
Yeah, I kind of always love thinking back to like the very beginning of transparency. And what I love about this when I do that is the fact that when we started doing that, or especially when Joel started doing that, no one called it transparency. If you think back all the way to when Buffer was tiny, we were making $50, $100 a month, and sort of no one was paying attention. Rightfully so, right? Why would you? We were still sharing all the stories and all the lessons learned, and we were kind of tweeting, and we were saying like Joel was sharing. We have the first paying customers. This is how many users we have now, and back then that was just sharing, right? Like no one would say like, oh, well, you're so transparent, because the numbers were so small. And instead of what started to happen was we kept on growing, and we kept on sharing. And what happens usually is that at some point, this from $50 a month it became 500 and 5,000 and 50,000 and 500,000, and along that way, at some point, people started to be like, this is kind of strange, that you keep doing this, right? That we don't really see that very often, right? And I think it didn't really cross our minds until a certain stage where we actually looked back and sort of tried to connect the dots backwards and seeing like, oh, interesting, this is what we've been doing all this time. And when that point happened, we sort of became a lot more intentional about it. We realized, oh yeah, transparency is something that we're excited about. And first we were excited about it intuitively, just we thought it was the right thing to do, to share and be open and put things out in the world, help other people that have helped us with their open learnings, and sort of give back to people. And then sort of really taking a critical look at our company and saying, like, what are things that could be transparent about now that we have that intentional viewpoint that we sort of haven't been transparent up until this point. And so we started to really try and think about different things and started to make lots and lots of different things transparent, from revenue to salaries to equity breakdowns to spending, how we spend our money if you pay us, and the real reason, if I trace it back, kind of comes back to this lifestyle design, where I think Joel and I believe, and then many in the company, is that fundamentally living a transparent and kind of open life has so many benefits for us as people, like holding ourselves accountable and being open with ourselves and with the world, and then building this huge amount of trust from people. The line that I love quoting, and I've quoted it many times in the past, is sort of people coming up to us and saying, you know what, I know more about the company, about your company, than about the company I'm currently working for every day that I go to work for. And that's why I want to be part of your company. That's why I'm so attracted to read and learn more about your company. And to me, that really kind of like makes me really excited to hear stories like that when people have this, you know, fundamental trust about what we do, and that's in good times and in good times and in bad times. Like, you know, some of the worst times we had was when Buffer got hacked, and we were still able to maintain. It was a true test for us, but luckily we were still able to maintain that same level of transparency and saying like, look, we got hacked, you know, 5 minutes after we got hacked, and saying like, we don't know what's going on, but we know we got hacked, and you know, we'll tell you as we know more about it, and we apologize greatly for that mess, but we don't want to sort of, because things go bad, stop being transparent. And that's still a big challenge now, where, you know, I think we're sometimes leaning towards the fact of sharing the good things, you know, when there's a lot of things that aren't going that well, or like, you know, things that are challenging for us, or things where we failed on certain things. And I think like people appreciate those sharings oftentimes the most. They say like, you know, this makes me feel like a human being, just in the way that, you know, everyone else is one. And it creates this deep level of connection. Like one thing we recently shared was that some of our social traffic dropped. But you know, we are a social media marketing company. We build software. We're supposed to know exactly what we're doing, and that again created this huge level of empathy from the whole community that's in social media, saying like, you know, they're so grateful that even though it's not great, right? We don't want to celebrate it, right? But we want to share in the learning and in the lesson together, that this is something we can all go and do and improve. So that's sort of a roundabout view of how I think transparency came about and how we think about it.
Nice, nice. And you can go to open.buffer.com, open.buffer.com, see a lot of great things on there, and it's amazing because it's not just you guys, but it's like your whole team is posting up like all their thoughts about how the culture works and like the things that they like about it, and it's pretty amazing. So I highly recommend you go to open.buffer.com to check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, you can also go to buffer.com/transparency, and we have links to the key different things. And so I think, yeah, those two combined is perfect, because open.buffer.com is you know, approach to kind of having a continual stream of those things. It's the blog, and we're continually sharing like everything in a lot of detail. And then buffer.com/transparency is like kind of high level like introduction of like, okay, here's how we're transparent about salaries. Here is a list of all the salaries of everyone in the company and the formula we use for salaries. And then here's equity, and here's the pricing breakdown of when you spend $10, you know, this much goes to salaries, this much goes to retreats, to the team being in Hawaii and things like that. So yeah.
Nice. I want to open up to questions. I have one question that's kind of like a personal question for me. But before we do that, could I please have someone turn on the light above here? Just like soften up just a little. Sorry, I'm like a weird lighting guy. But okay, so I was on, thank you. I was on a blog, and I saw that you're interested in like a lot of like this like mindfulness kind of stuff, right? And you know, I like to meditate. I like to sit on my cushion and like do my thing. And you know, it kind of dawned on me, okay, if you're running a company, it's really a person that's running a company, so that's you guys there, right? So how do these things, like these kind of like philosophies or practices kind of integrate into like running a company?
Yeah, I feel like personally it's been something that I've been really inspired to do. I've been picking up a meditation habit about 2 or 3 years ago. I think Joel and I both started reading some of the books. There's this great Buddhist monk called Thich Nhat Hanh who writes some super simple books about, you know, how to live your life in a mindful way. And I couldn't help but sort of immediately notice how much impact that has had on my personal approach to working at Buffer. And I feel like a big lesson that I think I've learned from both from Joel, but from a lot of those books is I feel like I have a better sense of calm now as a person. I used to be a lot more kind of like hot-headed, is maybe taking it a bit far, but like, you know, a lot of times, like, you know, jumping to things maybe too quickly. Sometimes that can be a good thing, but sometimes that can be sort of also a bit too impulsive. But personally, for me, I felt that taking up this idea, a meditation practice and learning about my spirituality, especially as Buffer, I always tell, like, the original idea why I picked that up was that when Buffer was starting to gain some traction and we raised some money and we're in a good position. I came from a background where I didn't have like a money growing up, or didn't feel like I was, gonna do that well, and had these ideas about like what will be a successful life, or will be a happy life, and some of these things started to happen with Buffer, and I'm incredibly grateful. But I started to feel like, don't quite feel like I'm the happiest person in the world just yet, So maybe I've missed something. Maybe there's some other elements there that I'm not kind of like knowing about. So I remember I Googled who's the happiest person in the world, because I thought it's going to be me, but it wasn't me. And then I found that if you Google that, there is actually a guy. His name is Mathieu Ricard, and he's a French guy turned Buddhist monk, and he's also very interested in neuroscience, and I think he's been a neuroscientist himself. And sort of they measured his brain waves and sort of came up with the fact that he is, in fact, scientifically speaking, the happiest person in the world, which I thought was really fascinating. And I started to be really intrigued by this idea of, happiness. And he wrote this great book, which is, I think the title is like Happiness: Developing Life's Most Important Skill. And I was so blown away, because I always thought like happiness was this like vague thing that either happens to you or doesn't, but it's certainly not something you can practice. And he was sort of saying the exact opposite. He was saying like, no, you can practice happiness. You can, just in the way that you learn to play the violin, you can actually pick up learning how to be happier. And I thought like, wow, what a lucky thing that's possible. And so I started to learn about the things, and meditation is a big part of what he was doing. And personally for me, it's had a huge impact on my life. How I'm able to deal with difficult situations, and I'm able to deal with, especially within the company, when you have to deliver tough feedback, when you have to let someone go, when you have to kind of overcome some of those really, really difficult things. It's given me a lot to have that practice of like developing that deep sense of calm, and like, being able to not only do those things, but the more important thing is to do them and appreciate them. Sometimes we all know, like, I'm gonna push myself to do this, like, do this round that I really hate, or like, but actually switching that mindset to being like, oh, I'm feeling, oh, this is kind of interesting, having this healthy curiosity towards the adversary elements that we face in our lives. We're like, wow, this is like, I've been running for 20 minutes. It's interesting how my legs are feeling tired and burning. Like, kind of like having this healthy curiosity towards some of those negative emotions that we're feeling, or when we're angry. And like, I love sort of reading about this idea to like, cradle your anger like you would do a crying baby, and sort of picking it up and being like, oh, it's kind of interesting that I'm so angry at this person right now. And we can't always do it like that. Sometimes you just get carried away, and like, it's this storm of emotion in our heads. But I think whenever I do manage to do that, like, it's such a great way to not push the negative things away from us, but actually embrace them, but also at the same time not let them take over our consciousness.
Nice. I like that. All right. Can we open up to some questions? So we don't have a mic long enough, so you're just going to have to talk a little louder, and then we'll repeat the question. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could, I work with a startup that's basically, our product is healthy culture, like creating culture. And I was wondering if you could go into a little like nitty-gritty details around how you deal with conflict within the culture of your company, and also decision making.
Yeah, great question. Shall I repeat that? Yeah. So you have a company focus on helping companies create great culture, and how do we focus on conflict and what else?
Decision making.
Okay, cool. Yeah, conflict and decision making. Really great one. I think for us, like, one of the things we try and do personally, I think some of this is how we approach it, and some of it might not necessarily always apply to all to it might not be the best way. I think we take a lot of inspiration from how to influence and influence people for shaping our own culture of how to handle those things. I think there's a lot in that book around having like healthy human relations. I think one of the key things is to try and find common ground in terms of conflict. Try and find common ground that you agree on. One of the key things for us that we focus on is not using words of certainty. So we kind of always try and be, kind of unassuming with ourselves of saying, we're probably missing a lot of context. These kind of phrases that we try and use, and it's also that's the kind of people that we try and have as part of the team that have these personal values around, it's like humility, and I think we have a value of being a no ego doer. So I think, for example, I think product design is a key role where sometimes as a designer you can do some UI work or some design work and get maybe quite attached to your work, and then when it comes to then putting it out there in the wild and seeing how does it really perform when it's out there, and these are things where that value is really important for us, where we want the designers to be focused on sharing their design work with other people in the team, but saying like, this is just an idea I had. I'm not sure if it's going to be, the right way we should approach this. Like, what do you think? Rather than being like, this is awesome. Like, this is going to be amazing. Like, and being so certain about those kinds of things. So I think that's one of the things that we really try to focus on, and being very open to feedback. I think there's like, I often think about it as like these two different sides of like when you're giving some feedback and then when you're receiving feedback. We try to give feedback in a way where it's saying, probably missing context, just wanted to be fully honest about this and share this thought that I've had. I wonder if you like, does this resonate, or can we talk about this? And being quite gentle, being unassuming, and being open to the fact that you're probably almost like seeking context, maybe asking questions more than just jumping out at that feedback. And then on the other side of receiving the feedback, we really try and focus on, being very open to it, being kind of, not having that ego too much of like, try not to be defensive. These things are really hard, but try to take, a deep breath and before you respond back right away. And these are things just for us that we really look out for as part of the hiring process. We have several interviews done. We also have a 45-day kind of, we call it the buffer boot camp period, where we're really trying to see, does it feel like a good fit for both sides here? And it's as much for the person to feel like, is that level of transparency going to be, too much? Is that going to be hard? Is it like, working remotely, like having that, maybe not having an office that you go to, is that going to be hard? And part of that in that time we're trying to see is that defensiveness is in these things. So then we're really trying to figure these things out. So I think that's hopefully that kind of covers it.
Could you? The decision making was the second one. Yeah, I can talk about it briefly. I think how we try to approach making decisions is like we've actually moved from one model to another one very recently. Is we used to have a model called the advice process, where the person who was oftentimes the leader would not make the decision, but the person closest to the problem, oftentimes the team member, will make the decision and get advice. So we're required to get advice and called it the advice process. That didn't quite work out that well for us in reality, so we actually switched that back so that the leader oftentimes now still makes a number of those important decisions. And the most important part when it comes to decision making, and I think Joel has actually done a lot of work to kind of like coach the whole company on that, is to always provide the full context when you're thinking about a certain decision. Similar to how we deal with conflict, it's like dealing with decisions in a way where instead of saying like, this is how we're going to do it, can we go and do this, to really give the person that full context of why you think a certain decision is the right next step, and giving that person that full information. And I think it ties into with our value of transparency a lot. I think where oftentimes, some leaders don't feel compelled they can give you the full context because you can't, the reason we're doing this is because our revenue is this, or we have this number or this metric that is sometimes not accessible to the whole company. And so I think I think Joel mentioned earlier that not every decision, not everything we do is maybe applicable to everyone if you don't have certain things in place. But we're really working on that context, saying like, if I'm making a decision, like I want to let you know exactly why I'm thinking about it in that way. That will, I think, get you a lot more buy-in, and I think that will also in the long term help you coach that person to think about decisions, before you even have to make them in that way.
Next question.
Okay, so this one here comes from my senior software developer, Zoltan. Is there any friction due to the open salary model? People in cheaper places have much better living standards than people in expensive places. Has Buffer not been able to hire someone because they couldn't go beyond the brackets?
It's a great one. So the question is, has the open salaries caused any friction amongst the team? People in cheaper places might have
Better living standards?
okay, better living standards. And yeah, I guess there is a disparity there. So I guess just share a little bit more context on that. So we have what we call open salaries. We have a formula for the salaries that determines the salary of every person in the company, and it's based on the role and your experience level, where you live, the living costs of that location, as well as the market for the role in that location, and that all those things combined determine what kind of salary you're going to have. And so I think what we find is very interesting, and it's been really amazing to put the open salaries out there, the formula, and all the salaries of everyone in the company, and just be transparent in that way and invite that feedback. It's kind of holds us to a higher standard. I think it's been one of the amazing advantages, benefits that we found is that we hold ourselves to a higher standard. I think we've had to put a lot more thought into salaries because we know we'll be transparent about that within the team and publicly as well, whereas I think sometimes you can end up with vastly varying salaries, and I think that's where a lot of the kind of salary inequality comes as well, is when you're just picking salaries and having a lot of salary negotiation and things. I think in terms of specifically some of the friction there, we do hear by having it out there, we've had lots of comments on the blog post. For example, someone wrote a full critique, which was kind of quite a scathing review of our open salaries, and it was really useful to hear some of these things. And there's a lot of questions around: is it fair that someone in a lower cost of living place makes less than someone in a higher cost of living place? And because maybe there's the argument that they're providing the same value to the company, but they again then getting paid less. And you could almost say the same the opposite way, because the way that we've structured our formula is that we actually we take into account the cost of living of a place. But the lower the cost of living of a place, we actually pay proportionally higher. So someone, for example, we have somebody in Cape Town, and it's quite a low cost of living place. It's also a very low market rate for a software engineer in Cape Town, and we end up paying, I think it's about 2.5x, the market rate, because we really want to pay a lot higher. And for us, we have some specific, the differences of being a distributed team. It's not just, doesn't make sense for it to just be equivalent to it being the same as, similar to the market rate there for working for a different company in Cape Town, because we are a remote, a worldwide company. We are kind of like a Silicon Valley company in a way, so we want to be able to offer these. It's like by joining Buffer, you can have work with team, hopefully with a team that's like hopefully we're kind of like a world-class team that you can be part of. So you get this salary that's kind of 2.5x the market in Cape Town, but then someone in San Francisco or New York where the salaries are super high, we try and pay above market there, but just a bit above market, not necessarily like 2.5x. So, and the interesting thing is that creates this situation where the salary for being in Cape Town is significantly lower than the salary that you would make in San Francisco, but proportionally it's much higher. And so there's just a lot of different things to think about there, and that's where people sometimes have criticisms one way or the other. It's like, how can we? And so we do our best to try and think what is fair and what does fairness even mean. And I think one of the key things that I've come to over time is that fair does not mean equal. So you can have different things and it can be fair for different people. Another thing that we do, which we've had a lot of kind of criticism for or just questions around, is we actually provide a bonus or kind of a salary, a higher salary if you have kids. So if you have people that depend on your salary, we will give you $3,000 a year additional salary for each person that depends on your salary. And that's been another thing where people say, why, what if I can't have kids, or what if I just choose not to, or I just happen to be at a different point in my life, like I'm still providing, what's the difference in providing value to the company? So there has been a lot of these questions. I think within the team, it's not been very contentious. It's one of these things where when we come up with the formula, which we had a new formula recently, which a lot of these different things that I'm mentioning are included in the formula, and we try and get a lot of advice during that process. So myself and Leo worked quite a lot on that formula, and Leo's taking it further now and doing further iterations on it with some other people in the team. And it's something where we're just constantly trying to get a lot of input from the team. And so what we arrived at is something that the whole team is very happy with. But then when we put it out there, there's definitely a lot of flaws in it still, but it's something that everyone's happy with. So we don't really see much issues there. I think one of the advantages we have is that we've been doing this for a little while. We've had open salaries for about 3 years now, and so for a long time we've been in a position where everyone that joins the company is very aware that we do this. And like Leo mentioned, people feel like they know more about Buffer than they maybe do about the company they're currently working for. Like one of the ways that it comes across is they can see all the salaries of everyone in Buffer, and literally the names and the salaries. And we also have a salary calculator. You can go to buffer.com/salary and pick where you live and the role, and it'll tell you how much you would make if you're part of Buffer. So you can kind of find out so much about that, but by the time you come to applying, it's not going to be, people are aware of that, there's not too much negotiation and things.
And sorry, just to add on to that, so where you live, is that like where you're a citizen of, where you currently reside? How does that flip-flop between someone that lives, maybe 6 months in Thailand and then 6 months in the Valley?
That's a really good question. So the question is, where you live, what is that? Is that like where you're a citizen of? Is that where you reside? Is that, what if you're moving around a lot? And it's one of the key flaws with the formula right now. And there are several people in the team that are nomadic, that are just traveling all the time, and it doesn't really work in those cases. And there's some really interesting situations there where there's kind of, I imagine, like, what if you choose to go and live somewhere, you choose to go and live in Vietnam, but you were living in San Francisco. Like, in some ways, there's people that choose to be freelancers, and their salary wouldn't change. They can do their freelance work from anywhere in the world. So why should your salary go down just because you choose to then go and be in Vietnam? But then compare that to someone that grows up their whole life, in Vietnam, and the options that they might have of other, working in software in Vietnam, like, it's going to be maybe quite a bit lower than San Francisco. So like, how do we reconcile that? It's like we're working on that a lot right now. I'm not really sure exactly what the solution will be there, but we do need something that's maybe a bit more flexible than just right now. We kind of change the salary to the location that you're in, but if you're moving quite frequently, it's changing a lot. And the other thing is, if you go and live somewhere for 3 months or for a month, it's going to be more expensive for you than if you were going to move completely and get a long-term lease somewhere. And so do we then help out with that?
Just have like a quality of life. You're trying to keep everyone maintaining a certain.
Yeah, we do have like an overall philosophy that we want to enable people to have a good life, a good quality of life, and we want to, as a company, we feel like we're lucky to be in this position where we have this great opportunity to to serve customers and to also have this wider impact on how do you define work today and in the future, what's changing there. And so we do want, as individuals working together, to be able to focus on that greater opportunity that we have, rather than thinking too much about really just getting by.
Nice. Other questions? Can we get some? How about in the black shirt back there? Come on, man.
Question for you all. Is it safe to say your investors own 23% of the company based on the equity splits? You didn't show the investors, just like the audience.
The question is, do our investors own 23% of the company? Don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, I think it's a bit less than that. I think it's Joel is guessing 18%. I think that sounds about right.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think it's more like 18%. Yeah. In our case.
I see a hand but no head right behind. That's interesting to me. Yeah.
Okay. Are you guys doing anything particularly new in 2016? Are you guys trying starting any new companies or taking the company in any different direction other than the way the companies traditionally function, staggering posts and such?
Yeah. Yeah. The question is, are we doing anything particularly new this year? Anything particularly cool?
Yeah.
Great question. Yeah, we have recently acquired a product and another company. It's called Respondly. We rebranded it to the name Respond. And so Buffer is moving into the social media customer service space in 2016. I think that's the big new thing from our side. Oftentimes, Buffer has been associated, its brand has been associated with social media publishing, social media marketing, and we always felt this really strong need from our customers that they wanted us to do a little bit more than the publishing and the analytics side, and so now we're gonna go into helping you respond, for the name, to tweets, the long-term Facebook posts, people post Facebook Messenger, email, just generally taking, our ideas to customer service, and especially social media, where we already feel like we have a very strong intuition on what kind of product we feel like could make people's lives easier. So that's, I think, one of the big things of 2016 for us.
So I've been following the work that you've been doing with diversity, which we recently blog, and was very interested. I have an HR background, so I was very interested in what you're doing with that, and also related to your recruiting. For example, how do you decide on what's your process for deciding to bring people into the company, integrating them into the company, and then also expanding your net so that you can have more diversity within the company?
Really great question. Thanks. So yeah, the question is, what are we doing to focus on diversity right now in the company, in our hiring process and bringing people on board, and yeah. So I think it's been a really interesting journey for us. I think in the spirit of transparency, and we have two people in the team who have really championed focus on diversity and inclusivity. Neil and Courtney, they've been really great to push that forward, and myself and Leo have been excited that they've really brought that to life, and try and really talk with them a lot, and help them to push that forward as much as possible. I think we had an interesting situation where we are 75 people in 50 different cities, all across the world, in 5 continents, and so in a lot of ways we have a lot of, a huge amount of diversity, so many different accents and languages in the team and things. But then at the same time, we do have some challenges we really need to tackle in terms of the amount of diversity we have in the team right now as well. So one of the really great things that's happened in the last 6 months or a year has been that we thought, okay, how can we work on this problem, and then you kind of trace it back to, okay, the people we're bringing on board depends on the applicant pool, the people that are applying, and we've been lucky that our hiring has been almost 100% inbound of people getting in touch with us that have heard about Buffer and our culture and things. We've been lucky to get around about 2,000 applications a month for all the different roles we have, and so we've actually been able to take quite a data-driven approach to what's the, as an example, what's the gender ratio there and things like that. And we hit a really great milestone recently in the last month or so, where we now have 50% 50-50 ratio, gender ratio for, and maybe correct anything that I mentioned earlier, we have 50-50 ratio for the applicant pool now, and it used to be quite a disparity there. I think, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was probably like 70%, 80%, maybe even male applicant pool before. So, and that's been, I'd say some of the specific things we've done there have been the wording, language that we're using in the job listings that we have, and especially the titles we have for, we had even, for example, using the word developer instead of engineer was something that we found. Oh yeah, we used to use hacker. Yeah, that was the key one. So we would say like, web, like a hacker, growth hacker, iOS hacker. These are the terms we were using for, and it's these kind of terms that I think can make a big difference. And we went from hacker to then engineer and then developer. And I think that was one of the key examples that made a big difference. And there's little things like, making sure that not all of your examples you have in blog posts or in the job listings are like male-oriented things, saying he and things like that. So, yeah, it's something. And then, of course, in the spirit of transparency, one of the things we did quite early as well is to make all of that data, the applicant pool data, the current team diversity, make that all public. So we have a diversity dashboard at diversity.buffer.com. You can go and see all of that information as well, and we put that out there because we, not 100% happy with the situation, and we want to hold ourselves accountable to that and get ideas from other people as well. So, yeah,
it's awesome.
One thing I just want to say to that, we actually have a session this week at the retreat. It's called Unconscious Bias Training, with someone that's flying in from San Francisco. So we're really excited to make some big efforts at Buffer, and Joel and I oftentimes reflect on the fact that we are both two white males. We've been a little bit biased and not that conscious of some of the issues going on around gender, ethnicity, and some of those things. And personally, truthfully, it took me quite a bit of time to admit that, to myself, and thankfully to Courtney, to Neil, helping us see that we have actually not been doing that good of a job here. And sometimes in my mind, I would always see myself like, I'm treating everyone the same, right? I'm open to everyone. But then you look at some of our numbers and you look at some of the things we're doing, right, and like that are unconscious, right? Like you don't do those things with intentionally, but you still have the choice to change even your unconscious things, and I don't want to shy away. I think we both, all as a company, don't want to shy away from taking those steps. So yeah, unconscious bias training, we're really excited. So we have someone come in and teach the whole company on how we can all sort of have a better view and treating everyone in a better way.
Cool. It's okay if we get a few more? Yeah. Glasses. Sunglasses.
I was curious if you could talk about how your relationship with investors works with your culture, because I've worked in places that are kind of well known for being transparent as well, but when it came to the financing and the investing, that was not transparent at all. And I think it would be different. I imagine it
Really good question. Yeah, how does the transparency work with investors? And like I mentioned, that how do we make sure we don't sell a culture to get investment, basically? Yeah, I think it's been a really interesting one. We've had 2 rounds of funding. We did 1 round of funding in late 2011. We raised 450,000 from 19 different angel investors at that point. And then we've done another round of funding at the end of 2014. We did raise 3.5 million at a 60 million valuation. And I'd say the really interesting thing in terms of culture and transparency with those 2 rounds of funding has been that when we did the first round of funding, we didn't really know what company culture was. We didn't really have a full grasp on what our culture and our values would be. So when we raised that funding, it was much more about product and the vision and things like that. And I think we were lucky in a sense to raise from 19 different investors, and kind of no investor has, there was no lead investor. The highest check that an angel investor wrote was 25K, and so it allowed us, and we didn't, there was no board seat given to an investor, for example, at that point. So that was just structured in a way where we knew we were still figuring out things ourselves. We were still, this was us doing this, and all the investors have been really amazing and helpful and great advisors to us, cheering us on. And interestingly, just after we raised our funding, we realized that we wouldn't be able to get visas to stay in the US. So then we decided, where should we go? And we went to Hong Kong for 6 months, and then we went to Tel Aviv and Israel for 3 months after that. And so there was actually the Tech Bunch headline was Buffer raises $500,000 and what's it? Gets kicked out of the US. and then, for some of our investors, it was a little bit of a shock, that we just decided to take their money and go off to Hong Kong. So, I think so. A lot of things just became shaped in those few years after we raised that first round, and then we put our values in place. We really defined that transparency was a value, and I think we've tried to have an open conversation with all of our investors, and I think a lot of them were really loving everything that we're doing, and some of them had thoughts of should we really do that and things. So, but luckily over time, the culture became very established, and so when we raised the last round, we had the values in place. We kind of become known for these values, and luckily, and our lead investor that we ended up with, that we working with now, and found and kind of really shared our values, and they knew a lot about us. And I think, one of the key things I remember is we were in the middle of we pitched and we got to know Kanye and Craig from Collaborative Fund, the lead investor, and after a few conversations, it started to get more towards okay, let's do this. And Leo asked the guys and said, so what do you think about us publishing the term sheet? How about that? And so publishing the valuation, all the terms, everything, literally the term sheet. So we have a blog post. If you just search Buffer 3.5 million on Google, you can find the blog post where we have the term sheet itself embedded into the post. And it was really that was a test, for us to see how much are they excited about and buying into our culture and our vision and things. And so the response to that was really amazing. And actually, I think Kanye, or was it Craig, we wrote a blog post a couple of months later saying these guys are Leo asked me this and it was uncomfortable and we went for it, and we're excited about this culture and things. And so it's been a great outcome, I think. And one of the other things that we have done is, I like to think that there's often 2 paths that are portrayed in terms of starting a company, growing a company. One is that you're self-funded and you just bootstrap it and you don't raise funding, and then you have full control over everything. And the other is that you do the Silicon Valley path of raising a lot of funding and having a board and raising every 1.5 years, burning a lot of cash, having a limited runway with the cash you have, and then when you get to the end of that runway, you've got to raise the next round, and you get in this cycle. And the way we've tried to approach it is that we've been profitable every time we've raised funding. We've waited a little bit later than most companies would to raise the round, and we've also raised less than companies than we probably could have at each point as well. And so that's helped us to kind of shape the terms a bit more ourselves and who we want to work with, and so that way we can find people who are really excited about the culture and what we're doing, and we can also kind of maintain a little bit more control. So we still don't have any investors on the board, and I think on the whole that's been a great thing for us to kind of control our destiny. I think at the same time it's an interesting thing where we have to hold ourselves accountable to, we maybe don't have a board that will say, keep us on the hook for certain things. So, but yeah, those are some of the ways we've tried to approach that.
Maybe just a couple more questions. Is that a hand in the back, or is that, oh, this is people talking.
I got a good question for you guys. How do you define creativity, and how do you apply it to your personal lives?
The question is, how do you define creativity, and how do you apply it to your personal life? Interesting. So think about that for a second. I think when I think about the word creativity and what it means for me, I think that there's two words that come to mind. The first one is discipline, and the other one is vulnerability. And I think that's what I think in my mind creativity is made up of to some extent. I think creativity partially is a habit. I think there's this great quote from someone is like, I happen to. Some people say they want to write. They only want to write things when creativity strikes. For me, creativity happens to strike at 8 a.m. every morning. And I really like that mindset, sort of creating creativity as a habit, like, every day, building a habit, this is when I'm going to produce, this is when I'll create something. So I think it's really about discipline, creating habits, and learning about how to build habits. So if someone would ask me how do I get more creative, I'll tell them try and work on your habit creation skills and your personal self-discipline, and learn about those things. And the second thing I think is vulnerability, is being able to open yourself up. I think creativity largely is how well you can connect with the world. The closer and the deeper you can connect with the world, the more of a response you're going to get back, and that requires you to be vulnerable and open yourself up. And so, whenever you are able to, share things and do things that scare you, when you can create something that scares you, when you put something out there that scares you, I would look for that. How many things have you done? How many things have you published? How many things have you created that have actually scared you when you put them out? Because I think that's a really good indicator of how vulnerable you've been and how high the likelihood is that you will connect with the world based on those things. So that's how I would define that and think about that.
Last question. One last question. In the front.
My industry is accounting and taxes, and I noticed you guys do not have it in-house. I guess I was just talking that I missed that, but as far as financial analysis and all that, how did you guys, obviously you're all over the place, so that technical issues, but as far as outsourcing and being so small, could you talk about that relationship?
Yeah. The question is, how do we think about accounting and financial analysis, especially because we're remote, and especially because, what's your name? Amanda has noticed from following us, we don't have an in-house accounting team, so we actually outsource that. We work with a third-party company. How does that all work, and what can people learn from that when they build their own companies? So we have recently brought our first finance hire on board, and his name is Kareem, and he's been helping us a lot to get on top of our books, and especially on the financial analysis side. So he's his title or his role is finance planner. So he helps us to get a handle on sort of our forecasting and our projections, knowing like where we will be. We've been really poor at that before, or poor is maybe the wrong word, very raw. Or so the way we've done it before was we would check our bank balance at the end of the month to know whether we have enough or if there's anything that makes our alarm bells ring. And you know, we have 70 people, we felt like that's not too responsible to take that approach. And so we started to take some steps, and Kareem was really helping us to know, okay, based on what the trajectory we're on, where will we be in a month from now, 2 months from now, by the end of the year, what does that mean in terms of hiring, in terms of budgeting, in terms of expenses, in terms of retreat planning, right? Everything that sort of costs money. So that's been a big help for us. We've over time we're gonna converge onto the fact that we will bring all of accounting and all of those functions in-house and have people run those things internally. We've taken some steps to initiate that already, where we sort of using software like Zenefits that we can also handle and monitor internally once we make that transition. But usually the piece of advice that I would give to other companies that start doing that is I believe that you can do a lot. First of all, at the very start yourself, where you don't have to worry about it too much, and you can sort of. I don't want to give the irresponsible advice to say you can leave it by the wayside, but you can sort of get by with sort of the minimal stuff for quite some time, and then I think, even though I don't believe in outsourcing when it comes to many functions in your startup, especially product or marketing or some of the core things that really help you actually make a difference, but I feel like on certain things that in our case were not a core skill that either Joel or myself had from the start. It felt like either us learning that and grinding through it versus getting a little bit of help and spending a little bit of money. That felt like a wise choice, and so we found this great company called Fireside that's helping us with this right now. They're doing a lot of our payroll, our taxes, our compliance, and expenses, and a lot of those things. So that's been a huge help, and I can highly recommend to try and look for something like that, especially after you hit the threshold. I think it's time well spent to have someone outsource, and then over time, I think usually the number is like when you hit like 50 team members, so we have a high-level financial advisor as well. He kind of says what he sees. Once people hit around 50, then oftentimes it's time to bring someone in, start bringing finance and accounting slowly in-house over time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for reaching out to the community. You didn't have to do that, and you did. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Also, Ariel, thank you for setting everything up. Made it so easy. BoxJelly team, making my life so much easier. Like, I actually have a life now. It's like, oh, that's so much better. Thank you. And yeah, so we're gonna be hanging out for a while. Yeah, please mingle. We have beer. A guy named Kai came in, totally rebuilt our keg yesterday, just out of the goodness of his heart. So thank you, Kai. You're not here, but And yeah, hang out. Thanks.
That was great.